All right, Tony Mormino with the HVAC TV podcast. Thank you again for joining us. Today I have Chloe Glynn, who is a HVAC facilities consultant with Midwest Mechanical. Chloe, how are you today?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, so Chloe, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see it, but if you're listening to the audio version, she's got this amazing background, which I have determined is Chicago, correct?
Yes, you got it. Chicago. Yeah, the skyline in Chicago is insane. Anytime I've went anywhere else, I'm like, this is nice, but it's not Chicago.
Yeah, exactly. I love the big cities when I go there, and then I love coming home from there, but I do love like the walking around and the big buildings and the architecture, because we were talking beforehand, and the city I live in is like 620 people. So it's, when we see 3 cars in the other lane going the other way, we're like, oh my God, where's all this traffic coming from?
Yeah, trust me, you are not missing out on the amount of traffic Chicago has. So getting anywhere, you always have to plan for 15 to 20 extra minutes just in case for some reason.
That's right. Yeah, I know folks who live in Atlanta and big cities like that, and they literally over an hour and a half each way in their car. And I lived a little bit of that in Jacksonville, Florida, and I'm
Sure.
glad to be done with that part of my life. But
Don't blame you.
yeah. Cool. Well, so, what we do here is we try to bring some value to the HVAC engineers, contractors, and building owners. So I think you will fit that category very well with your, I see a lot of posts of you out on job sites, and I have to say I'm extremely jealous because I don't get to go to a lot of job sites like I used to. I'm stuck well, I shouldn't say stuck. I love my job and I love what I do, but
Sure.
I don't get out in front of the equipment very much. So it's nice when I look at your posts, I'm like trying to figure out what equipment it is. Sometimes it's so old and beat up. I'm like, what is that thing? I don't even know, which we know how that goes.
Your
right?
guess is as good as mine, and I'm physically there. So sometimes I see stuff and I'm like, we're sure we want this on a maintenance agreement. They're like, yes, absolutely. And it's just like the shell of a boiler. They're like, no, it'll be repaired by the time we're ready to go. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I don't think so. It's funny when you said that though, like, and but this more than I do, but we do a lot of shows on like the whole electrification, decarbonization, like sustainability, all these buzzwords and stuff. And people
Sure.
spend a lot of money to be more efficient. But, my deal is before you do that, like, have you changed your filters?
Right.
Have you cleaned your coil lately? Have you cleaned your water? Like dirty water is an amazing, takes your energy efficiency away easily, and it's easily repairable. So
Yeah.
do you see a lot of that? Is it more from like when you go on a job? Well, walk me through a day in the life of an HVAC
Sure.
facilities consultant. How does it start?
Yeah, sure. So I use the title HVAC facility consultant because it sounds really good. But technically I'm a preventative maintenance sales rep, right? So
I love
my
it.
sole job at Midwest is preventative maintenance planning. So typically beginning of the week and end of week look a little different. So beginning of the week, I'm reaching out to people, calling usually chief engineers, plant managers, property managers, any type of facility director, to try to meet with them, introduce them to myself and Midwest. And once I get past that part, it's putting together, mechanical walkthroughs. So when I'm putting together a preventative maintenance agreement, part of my process is walking the facility myself. I look at condition, accessibility. I take pictures and model serial numbers. Why I do that is because the agreements I put together, unless asked for, aren't cookie cutter. I need to see how it's applied within the space. I don't want to assume anything. And also other people's equipment lists, I've figured out what they label as something I would label completely different.
You mean like the type of equipment it is?
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm like, that's not a makeup air, that's an air handler. But whoever did it before labeled it that way,
Gotcha.
So just verifying that that's correct. After I do that, I'll put together agreements, review them with people. And then, from then on, it's kind of just making sure we're at a mutual agreement of scope of work, pricing, type of equipment on the list and things like that in order to get a signed contract eventually, I would say. But I would say roughly in a week, I'll usually do like 2 to 3 walkthroughs. Depends. I tend to do multi-building walkthroughs. So depends how much steam I have after I do like 5 or 6. Cause I'm someone who like, while I'm there, I'm like, let's do every single
Yeah.
building as long as they're down with it, which a lot of the times they are.
You said five
So
or six. Do you do 5 or 6 different jobs in a day?
I'll
Sometimes.
do 5 or 6 mechanical walkthroughs for preventative maintenance. Yeah, I think the
Wow.
most I've done in one single day was 12.
Oh my
And I was
gosh.
there from 7 to like 2:30. And I remember when myself and the facilities director got done, we both just looked at each other and we were like, that was horrible for both of us.
Yeah. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's like I'm there. I would have to come back anyway, and I'm already
Yeah.
like on a roll with tracking and making sure everything's separate, that it just makes sense to keep going.
Well, it's better than having no calls. That's for darn sure.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's some weeks with the Midwest, there's a lot of shoulder weather
Mm-hmm.
where it's, like mid-range 60s, pretty enjoyable. I always say like open the window weather we have here too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which there will be like lulls because there's no extreme heat or extreme cooling. People aren't feeling, the pain
Right.
of heating and cooling breaking down. So I'd say there is lulls in the season, but not horrible.
Yeah. So how do you get on a job? Is it they've had a maintenance person they haven't been happy with, they're letting them go. They're looking for a new maintenance person, or they've had no maintenance, or they just have units that are down, or is it all the above?
Sure. I've seen both. So if a unit's
Mm-hmm.
down, I'm not the person you'd want out there, and I make that pretty clear to them. I'll initially meet them, depending on the opportunity, so that I can at least qualify it a little bit before, having a project engineer come out there, because I'm going to talk about maintenance anyway. So I wouldn't get a ton of information on the project, but enough that if they're calling them, it makes sense to schedule to go out.
Mm-hmm.
I would say part of it, it's mainly maintenance. Sometimes they don't have maintenance contracts. Sometimes sometimes they haven't had one in a few years. It's
Mm-hmm.
very industry based. Sometimes they have a full-time heating and cooling, mechanic on their staff. So I mean, it varies so much. I'd say primarily I spend time in the city, in high rises or public school districts in the suburbs.
Mm-hmm.
So it varies a lot. I would say downtown, most buildings have a chief engineer. And then schools, it varies a ton when it comes to how many
Right.
facilities guys they
Oh
have
my
and
gosh.
budgets
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
For sure. Are you to the point now where when you get a call for a building, you're like, oh, I know that building? Or are you
Yeah,
still trying to figure them all out, or do you know most of them?
I I have like target accounts I've gone after for a while. So like when they
Uh-huh.
finally call, it feels pretty good. It's funny. I always say like I won't remember somebody's name, but I did a walkthrough like 3 years ago, and I'll remember they had 10 rooftop units, and I'm like,
Isn't
I
that
don't
crazy?
understand like how I can remember this. I was just at one recently. That when I first started, it was one of my first appointments I ever had, and I knew nothing at the time. And I
Right.
remembered exactly where to park. I was like, how do I remember this?
It's
And he was
crazy,
like,
isn't
how
it?
do you remember that? I was like, I don't know. I was like, honestly, I don't know.
It's so funny you say that. I do a lot of video shoots. Like we'll do a walkthrough in a big facility, a big factory. And I could remember like, oh, I remember I got a shot of that compressor from the side. I could remember like exactly
Yeah.
the stuff, but I can't remember what I did yesterday. Like it's so
Right?
crazy. Like a year.
I lose my keys pretty often, but I
I
can
know
tell
it's
you
crazy.
exactly why I didn't get that Brian boiler that was, 300 million BTU. It just doesn't make any sense.
Right. That's why I think we're doing the right job then. We're in the right career.
Yeah.
That's if we could remember that stuff, but it's so funny. So, yes, okay, so you get a call, you go out there. How long have you been doing this job?
I've been about 4 years.
Oh,
So
4 years now. Gotcha.
it'll be 4 years.
Yeah.
I'd say the first year I knew nothing. I mean, when I got into heating and cooling, I knew absolutely nothing. I always joke about this, but when I found out that cooling was rejecting heat, I was like, I am in so much trouble. This is not going to go well. But I would say, honestly, my boss was really helpful in the process of teaching me. The technicians we have were more than willing to teach me. If I didn't know something, I would ask a question of, okay, why are we opening this up, or why would I offer this in this scenario? So like
Mhm.
as I kept doing it over and over, I just got more familiar. And then every time I think I know enough, I walk into some crazy application of something that I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to fit a guy in a 2-inch space to maintain, this air handler or whatever it
Right.
is. So it's always, I'm always learning for sure. But I'd say initially that's how I got my bearings.
And how did you get started? What got you into HVAC?
Sure. So I originally sold credit card processing, which is completely different. And
Mm-hmm.
at the time, a bunch of my friends were union guys. So like in local 150, like operating engineers or plumbers, electricians. I grew up, my dad was in a union. He was actually a pipe insulator. And so I was just really familiar with it. And it seemed like they had decent work-life balance. They all seemed to, make a good living, but I didn't want to be a laborer. So I
Mm-hmm.
thought I would try for project management, which if you have zero experience in project management, you're applying to be like a senior project manager at like Walsh and Power, like, cause that's what I was doing. You get denied 100 times.
Right, right.
So I did that, kept getting denied. And then a recruiter reached out to me and was like, why don't you try
Mm.
sales, but like in a construction type field or something like that? And I was like, oh, that's probably smarter to start off with.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, yeah, I interviewed with Midwest, and that was 4 years ago, and it stuck.
Yeah, that's funny. So two things I could relate to there when you were talking about still learning. So 25 years for me, and still when I walk into a mechanical room today, I'm like, what's going on here? Oh, okay. And I got to spend like 15 minutes going through it. And then a lot of times I'll post something where I think I'm an expert and I'll get some comments saying, you're wrong. This is actually should be blah, 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 blah. You should call it this, that. I'm like, gosh dang it. I should have known that. Like, I should know
Right.
that by
Yeah.
now. So it is always learning. And that's okay. I've come to realize that's all right. Like, that's just how it is in all businesses. And you mentioned like getting into sales too. So I went to school. My dad got me into HVAC because he was a residential contractor, and I learned HVAC through him. And he took me a few installs during the summer in Florida, where we had to climb in a few attics, which is about 500,000
Yeah.
degrees up there. It's so hot. And my dad was pushing me to go into college. Well, I didn't want to go to college because I didn't like school very much. And after that, I was like, well, maybe I'll give this college thing a try. So I went and got an engineering degree. But what I related to in your story was going into sales. So I wanted to go into sales for whatever reason. I don't know why. I worked in restaurants as a waiter, and I felt like that was kind of salesy. So that's what got me into sales originally too. So it's funny.
Yeah,
And we
that's
didn't
cool.
have,
I actually didn't go to college. So
yeah,
I tried for a year, and I was not good at it. Basically,
yep.
if like I had the opportunity to go work, I would take the opportunity to go work, and then I'd miss school, and then
I get it.
like you're not going to do well if you don't show up, basically.
Yeah,
And so then I was like, what, school is not for me. And how I initially got into sales before even this is I Googled how to make money without college.
there you
And
go.
sales was like the number one answer. I was
Right,
like, all
right.
right, sales it is.
Well, that's great. I love it.
Yeah.
We have, we've had Crumpton on here and a couple of the guys before. We talk about the trades, and the gals too. We've had women on the show too.
Yeah.
And we talk about the trades and like the college versus the trades and all this kind of stuff, which I'd love to talk to you, get your take on that. So I went to college, like I said. My son, Nate, he's 18, and I was hoping he would follow in my footsteps with kind of the marketing stuff. And I took him to some factories where we did some videos. And I said, look, let me show you. Here's what the technician does. Here's what the manufacturer does. You want to work with your hands. Here's the sales guys over here, the engineers. So I kind of like exposed him to all that. And he really
That's
gravitated
cool.
towards working with his hands. And he said, I think, technician is what I would like to do. So he's been taking some classes on that. And he's working now as an intern for the company I work for. So I'm proud of him. He's going into that route.
That's
And,
cool.
him sitting in a classroom just wouldn't go well. It's just, he's not that kind of personality. And I
Sure.
totally get that. And I'm like, today, the trades and a lot of jobs today you could do very well without a college degree, right? And there's nothing wrong with college degree if that's great.
Right.
I just encourage folks, look at the ROI and the happiness of your
Yeah.
existence, right? Like, don't get a 6-figure debt degree for a job that's going to be paying you the same. If you didn't have a degree, it doesn't do anything for you, right?
Sure.
So what's your experience with that? What would you say to people who are looking around right now and Google searching?
Yeah, I think college isn't a bad option. I think it just depends. I mean, if you're becoming an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, you're going to need that piece of paper and higher education in order to, consult people on that.
Hmm.
totally makes sense to me. I think a lot of things can be learned through taking a few classes without getting that piece of paper. I always said that a degree will get you probably an interview faster than me, just, but overall, if like I was going to an interview against somebody with a degree and that was the only difference,
Hmm.
I feel confident in it. That being said, again, the amount of debt you're going to go in, how fast do you want to start your career? I'm 24, so I started when I was 18 and was able to move pretty quick into sales. It just really depends on how you want to start your career, when you want to start your career, understanding what debt means, because I think people
Hmm.
don't realize the amount of debt you can get yourself into with college that takes a while to get out of and how it can affect you.
Yep.
And it's not kids' fault. They don't know financial literacy yet, which makes sense. You're in high school. But I would say it's good for a lot of other things like social interaction, building a network. If you use college right, you can do that. You might have access to certain programs that'll get you a job outside of college when you're done. It's kind of like living on your own for the first time, like a trial run. So there's a lot of
Hmm.
other benefits to it. I don't know if they're 100% job related, in my opinion, but
Yeah, I had a little too much of the social interaction.
yeah, I think so. I
I
think that happens to a lot of people.
I used to call my dad. He'd be like, "When are you graduating?" I'm like, "2 more years." He's like, "Tony, it's been 2 years for 6 years now." So it took me like 8 years to get my 4-year degree. So
Hey, as long
I
as
did
you
it
got it at
completely
the end,
right.
right?
I got it. But I love this conversation. So I guess the takeaway, if you're listening, ask around, try it before you buy it, go to some classes, but talk to some people in the field. Doing internships is really important. And you can, if you want to get in the trades or feel like you'd be good at that, don't not do it because of society. Like, don't, because sometimes there's that stigma like, oh, I'm going to go be a plumber, or I'm going to go be an HVAC tech. Some people who do that and enjoy it have great lives. There's nothing wrong with that at all. So,
Totally. Like their hours are pretty good. If you want to work overtime, you can. I actually went back to my old high school about a year or two ago to talk to their business. They have like a work study program. I was part of it when I was in high school, where you essentially do almost like half days and your work counts as high school credits. And I talked about the trades quite a bit on that presentation, because I just think they don't talk. It's coming back a little bit, but in high school, one, they don't glorify the trades, and two, they don't really show you that it's even an option, that you could
mm,
make good money, have good hours, good work-life balance. And honestly, a skilled trade you can use outside of work. Like I always think about how my
hmm
dad was like a jack of all trades. Like our furnace was down, he probably will fix it. The flooring needs to be done, he's got it. If he's going to paint that side of the house, yeah, he probably can do it. And then side work through that. I think people underestimate, how many times somebody whose furnace goes down, or their condenser, all it is clogged up with cottonwood in their house, and you could
mm,
easily, help them out. I think people underestimate that.
yeah, for sure. Well, that's all good information. And I think we could both agree that find something you enjoy, because you got to work. I'm 54, so I've been working for a few years now. And I've had jobs before where I stayed there and I stayed there too long. And I was like, man, I'm burnt out. I'm past this. That is not a fun experience. So find something you enjoy and go with that, and don't let society stop you. So that's the takeaway there. So let's see here. Let's talk a little bit about social media. I see you on LinkedIn. So
Sure.
Chloe has a great LinkedIn page where, if you want to see the day in the life of what her job entails, you should go follow her there. And I see a lot of photos you post on there. So how come, why do you do that? What's the purpose of doing that?
Yeah. So I started doing it like a few months into when I started a few years ago. And the reason I was doing it was because I felt like it kept me front of mind to
Mm,
clients without me physically having to call them, which I still do, and or email them. It was just another touch point initially. I also found it hard sometimes to find who I wanted to talk to at a building. It's easier to look it up, connect with them, and then they feel like when I call them that they know me a little bit,
mm,
based on that they see my face multiple times. They see I've been in mechanical contracting, that I'm not just like saying I'm in it. It's like, okay,
mm-hmm,
obviously she's posting pictures with centrifugal chillers or condensing boilers. It's not her first rodeo. And I thought it helped build credibility when I would call or reach out to people if they decided to look me up. I also think messaging people on LinkedIn helped. me. It felt because it feels kind of like texting. Like a lot of people have it on their
Hmm.
phone, they're more inclined to answer, but it's not useful if they can't check out my page and see what I'm doing and that I'm active in the community. I think the biggest thing is being active because if you post like now and then, they're like, okay, well, when was the last time? Is she not frequently in the field? Is she stepping out of it? So that's where I got into that frequency of posting was I was like, okay, I started with I'm gonna do one a week. And then I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to do two a week. And then I got into okay, every Monday I'm gonna post a Monday motivation. And then I was like, okay. So I started kind of manipulating my tactics as I went because I also needed it to be like digestible for me. Like it's not realistic for most people to go like zero and then start posting 5 times a week. You'll
Hmm.
burn yourself out or you're not going to see much at first. Like I always say the first year was rough for me. I got like 5 interactions and like 3 of them were people I worked with. So like that's not saying much. It took
And
a
and
while.
your cousin from
Yeah.
Philadelphia, right?
I'm like, and my one client, I'm like, great. Um,
Hey, but
so it takes time. Yeah, you have to stick
you
through
did
it.
more than 99% of people do, which is, I talk to people all the time about this. I love this. This podcast could be 6 hours if we're talking about social
Yeah.
media, but I'll tell them and they're like, yeah, I've been doing it, ain't working. I'll look at their feed. I'm like, bro, you've posted once in like 3 months. He goes, well, not many people
Yep.
saw it. I'm like, man, you need to turn it up if you want to use it as a tool. And I love that you're
Yeah.
actually using it as a sales tool, but you're doing it right. Like the worst way to use it is just to spammy message all these people with these 5 paragraph texts, but you're not doing
Yeah.
that. You're actually building trust. You're building, you're staying top of mind, like you said, and you're showing them that you know what you're doing, right?
Yeah. And also, I think there's two things people could do better. There's nothing
Hmm.
you could do wrong, but there is better. One, remember that it's professional. I think sometimes people post a lot of personal stuff. And I always found that interesting. Like you want to be personable, but they don't need to know everything about you and your personal
Hmm.
life and that your kid did this and you had the worst day of your life today and they do it all the time. I think having like a set track of things you follow and then having things like that once in a while makes sense because
Hmm.
you also want people to see the stability in working with you. I also don't really ask for business ever in my posts.
That's right.
Like my posts are very like this is what I'm doing because then it comes off a little pushy to me and that you're not being selective. Like there is some selectiveness you should have when doing it. And if you're asking anybody who sees it, like I don't know. I don't know if that's the best method. And I see it kind of often.
No, I love it. That's the kind of the same philosophy we use here is we're educating. We're bringing
Yeah.
content that brings value. And that's the main, core rule is does it bring value to the viewer? And I look at your stuff and it brings value to me because I'm like, I don't get out in the field
Thanks.
that much anymore. So I like to see what you got going on and the different types of equipment. And plus I usually see our branded the equipment we rep. I usually don't see the competitor stuff. So that's nice too. But I
Yeah,
think,
it's cool.
yeah, for sure. So the biggest thing is, you got to bring value. Are you bringing value? Are you selfless or selfish? If you're always, like you said, if you're always asking, hey, call me today and I'll come do this, blah, blah, blah for you. People don't
Yeah.
respond well to that. And it's not really brand building. And you're building a brand. You're building your brand
Yeah.
and your company's brand. And sales comes in when you don't build a brand. When you don't have a brand, you have to sell. Like you said, the guy calls you and he's seen your post. So he kind of already is warm. It's a warm lead. He knows you. He knows what you do. He gets you know what you're talking about, or at least you've been around a bunch of HVAC
Yeah.
equipment. Then you start talking to him and
It
he's
can't
like,
be
oh,
that bad, right?
she was
Yeah,
up
it
tripping over a
definitely
roof.
helps.
Yeah.
I would say at events too, this is more of a recent thing, which is just cool to see full circle. Is I've
Hmm.
been places and they're like, oh, you're that LinkedIn girl or you're that HVAC girl.
Love
I'm like,
it.
that's awesome. Just based on the repetitiveness of it. So now people identify that with my brand. So I'm like, okay, it's nice to know one that it worked because when you're doing it, it feels like sometimes you're treading water, trying to make
Hmm.
people understand. But now it's cool. Now people are like, you're that HVAC LinkedIn girl. I'm like, perfect. Sounds good to me.
You're loving it too when you hear that.
Yeah, of course.
Because it's, we hear that too when we go to trade shows and stuff. And it's, the first couple of years we didn't hear any of that. And I'm like, man, are the people watching this stuff that we're doing? Is anybody watching it? Now I could say with conviction that people do see it. And that's the other thing that, especially on LinkedIn, when you post stuff, and you might have, if you're new, you might have 500 people see it. that's 500 people. That's a lot of people. And usually it's the
Yeah.
folks who know you, they're in your circle, right? It's not like just anybody. But yeah, so it's a powerful tool, and I encourage a lot of folks to use it. And I like that it it builds up the HVAC community. I think it does. And we're historically like dinosaurs on social media. Like
Yeah.
HVAC, B2B is bad enough as it is. HVAC, we're like the
Right.
oldest dinosaur on there. And especially for trying to get new people in the trades. And you're young and you're female, which is great because we don't have, it's mostly male, folks in the trade. So
Yep.
you want to talk a little bit about, from a female perspective, what your experience has
Sure.
been?
Yeah, so I actually haven't had too much of a negative experience, luckily. I think it's due to two things will happen that could be negative. It just depends on how you take it. I would say you definitely have to have a little bit of thicker skin if you're a woman
Mm-hmm.
who's stepping into this, because I don't blame sometimes clients that I walk in versus a guy who's been doing it for 20 years, whose dad did it. No offense, I'm not calling you out. I would probably refer to him over me too.
Right.
It's a archetype of what you're supposed to look like and act like and be like in heating and cooling that I'm overcoming. But honestly, it hasn't been that difficult because I educated myself as much as I could technically without going too far. I'm not super technical, but I understand the basis of how things go. And being able to explain that and taking the time to build trust, I'm okay with that. Again, from their perspective, I'd understand being a little standoffish towards me. It helps now that I've been doing it for a few years. Before, when I first started, I was like, I get it. So that would be like a misconception, is that I don't really know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But I got over that pretty quick just based on learning information. I actually watch a lot of your shorts. Those are pretty helpful,
Mm.
I would say, for me, especially on like quick tips and things like that. Otherwise, everyone's pretty nice to me. Sometimes there's actually an advantage to me being a girl because there's not that many of us in this industry that people want to see you win.
Mm.
I've noticed. So sometimes people will
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely coach you up and they're like, you know what, I want to see her be successful with this, or they're really
Mm-hmm.
impressed by you. Where if maybe a guy was saying the same stuff I was saying, they're not going to say that to them.
Right. Let me get this guy off my
So
LinkedIn feed. He's bugging me. Right.
yeah, where like the reaction to me is a little different, which is nice. Of course, I've always been pretty assertive, so I've never had any issues on that end of things. And people generally are pretty nice.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually haven't had too many issues, I would say, or negative reactions. And if I do, I'd say my company in general is really supportive of
Mm-hmm.
like if I need extra assistance, or there's been times where people just don't want to work with a girl, and like, okay, that's
Mm-hmm.
fine. So transitioning that off and still making sure that I'm involved in the process to learn from it, they've always been really helpful.
Well, that's important when the company's got your
Yeah.
back. That's good.
Right. Yeah.
Good
They're
company
very good about
culture.
that.
It's good. We
Yeah.
got that good here too. So we're blessed with that, because I know a lot of folks don't have it. And that's Midwest Mechanical in Chicago, right?
Yep. Midwest Mechanical. Yep.
All right. Shout out to Midwest Mechanical. There we go.
Yes.
Cool. Well, let's do this. So we talked about, a little bit about the business you're in and what you do for a living and how that looks. Let's talk about a little bit about, you mentioned Monday motivations, and I printed a couple
Yeah.
of them out here. And I
That's
too
cool.
post, I post some, what I consider motivational stuff. And, there's people who post this and, this kind of positive energy, motivational stuff. And then I meet them in the real world and I'm like, man, you're nothing like, you're not practicing
Yeah.
what you
Right.
preach. You're not like that. So I want to talk to you about a little of this. And I know for me, like a lot of time, like I'll read a couple of these and maybe you tell me which one stands out to you. So the first one is
Sure.
switching your mindset from I can't to I'll learn is life changing. Good one. What you're not changing, you're choosing. I like that. If you aren't willing to work for it, don't complain about not having it. So which one of those jumps out at you, or they all jump out at you? You want me to
Sure.
pick one?
The second one. What you're
What you're
not
not
changing, you're
changing, you're
choosing.
choosing.
I think people forget the power they have over their own life sometimes. If you don't like something, you don't have to choose to submit to it. You don't have to choose to answer to anybody about yourself, technically, in a respectful way.
Sure.
if you're not happy with something, you can wake up tomorrow and decide, I want to change everything about my life. Is it that simple? No. Is there other people you have to consider? Yes. But I think people forget that they're in complete control of their lives. My boss actually always says this saying, and it sounds so simple, but I like it because sometimes I'll get, frustrated on an account, or I'm like, I don't understand like why it's not going through or what I did wrong. And he's like, you could only control what you can control. I remember the first time I heard that, I was like, okay. Like, I'm like, you just told me something that sounds exactly the same, but it's true. It's such a good thing. And it relates to that. Like, if you're controlling all the controllables on your end of things, and you're choosing that, which you can choose it, all your controllables you choose, then there is no reason why you should be getting worked up or not, doing the things that you want that make you happy.
Totally 100%. And what came to my mind when you were sharing that, which is really just another way to say the same thing, which is getting out of the results business, right? Like, I'm responsible for my work. If the work's good and I've given it my all and I post it and 2 people like it and 10 people hate it and leave bad comments, I can't control that. It usually doesn't happen, but
yeah,
but it can happen. I do get some negative comments from time to time, but same thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's just like, there's always going to be people that hate what you're doing. There's going to be people that like what you're doing. The good question to ask yourself is, do you like what you're doing? Like, do you like who you are? Do you like what you're doing? Because honestly, that's all that really matters.
Right.
That's a hard question to answer because it's so broad.
Yeah.
But I think if you live by that philosophy of, like, sometimes my girlfriends will like be in a scenario, they're like, I can't do anything. I'm like, well, you chose to do that. And they're like, what do you mean I chose to do it? I'm like, you made that decision to do that.
Like, you're supposed to agree with me. You're my best friend.
Yeah. I'm like, now fix it. Same thing with, mechanical contracting, though. It's like, okay, your 10-year-old boiler went down and you did no maintenance.
Yep.
You chose to do that, and now, unfortunately, there's a consequence, but you can fix it. It's very like, there's things that are fixable. So I think people also need to realize, like, you can also hiccup in that philosophy and still, like, get back to the baseline.
That right there is what I wanted to talk about, because when we post stuff, or when you post stuff, like, what you're not changing, you're choosing. When I post something like that, I'm posting that as a reminder to me.
Yeah.
Because I've forgotten it, and I just realized that, I forgot. I shouldn't focus on what I can't control. And then I'll post that, and people are like, thanks for this reminder. I said, yeah, bro, cool. I'm reminding myself too. I forget it all the time.
Yeah, right.
So what you said there is important. So talk a little bit about that, of getting back on the horse, if you will, or like getting off track in life and then keep going in the right direction.
I mean, there's going to be things that pull you different ways depending on the period of time of life you're in. Like, things happen. One week you can feel like your whole entire world's crashing down, and the next week you're like, wait, everything's fine. When you look at things as that most things are fixable and it's just a small time period, you're going to suffer through whatever you're going through, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's much more digestible. And honestly, most of the time, if you look back at things that happened to you that you thought were negative, you either learned something or you're like, wow, that wasn't even that bad, because you're so focused on it in the moment. It feels like it's everything, And so I think understanding that it's relative to time, it's like, oh, like, okay, that sucked for like 2 weeks. And then I figured out, like, I just need to stand up and deal with it. It becomes a lot easier. And also, I think looking back is fun to see what you overcame. I also, like, I think I've posted this before, but it was a while ago, like, the power of one more time. Like, at that point, if you have nothing to lose, you might as well try one more time. You're already down, you might as well go again. Right. That's kind of my philosophy with stuff.
And if you ever had that one more time that you did and it went your way and you're like, thank goodness I did it that one more time, right?
Yeah, I've had that happen quite a few times, specifically with, like, buildings I've wanted to get into, where I'm like, they've told me no so many times. I'm like, I don't know. My ego is getting a little bruised at this point.
Yeah.
And then, that extra time, I'm like, oh, okay, it worked out,
What's your go-to? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think, like, if you've already been rejected 10 times, what's an 11th,
Right.
Like, might as well try.
You're in the perfect role. So what's your strategy? You just keep calling them? You keep knocking on the door, or how do you do it?
So it depends. So I try to qualify so if I've met with them before and just say there
Hmm.
was no opportunity at the time, I try to qualify really hard. Like if I'm gonna go walk on your facility and do a mechanical walkthrough, I want to know there's a pretty good shot. You're gonna go, with me. I'm also okay with walking away and saying no. And
Mm.
I'll be really honest and say, I don't think there's an opportunity here. Like you seem happy. It's also your cousin who does, you know what I mean? Like I'm not trying to force
I love
somebody
it.
into
That's so
doing a
Chicago.
walkthrough. It
That's so
is. It's such
Chicago.
a
I know your
Chicago thing.
cousin's out here. Your cousin Tony's out
Yeah,
here.
your cousin owns this mechanical company. Like or is the tech, I'm not going to compete with that. Like knowing when to walk away. Also, I'm not in the business of selling a walkthrough. I think sometimes people think that because I
Mm.
post them quite a bit, but like I don't want to walk through if there's no potential for us to move forward. It's a waste of my time and I'm wasting their time.
Mm.
I'm not like, so, I'll make people slow down and sit down with me and talk about it before because some people you walk in and they're like, yeah, just go do a walkthrough. I'm like, wait, I don't even know what scope I'd be looking at, what I'm looking for, what you're doing now.
Right.
So I think slowing people down and having that conversation is pretty impactful when it comes to, doing that. I call people, I message people on LinkedIn. I'm not super pushy, to be honest. Like, I'm not, if someone's like, no, I'm not going to call them 2 weeks from now and be like, all right, so how about now?
Mm-hmm.
Usually I'll wait for like a major change in seasons and stuff like that to do it where, maybe they're experiencing a breakdown. Sometimes I drop stuff off for people. I've had conversations with them or I've met them in person and we talked about something. I always thought that was pretty impactful. Um, if I've been out there and there's more opportunity for business than what I already have, I've dropped stuff off for their staff before. Like I think people forget sometimes about the maintenance staff, not just
Mm-hmm.
like the director of like those guys are getting pulled 100 different ways. Like taking care of them, I feel like goes a pretty long way because they're working side by side with your guy anyway in the building. So I'd say those are my main outlets are calling, LinkedIn messaging, and then dropping by
Mm-hmm.
businesses. So just stopping in and asking, who's the chief here, leaving some information. Usually I try to do like fun drop offs though, because like anyone could drop off a card. I've done scratch offs before.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and
That's
I
a
always
great
say like
idea.
on it, like call me if you win, and if you don't, still call me because I want to know.
What if they
The
won
best.
$1 million? Do they have to
It
split it
better
with you,
sign
or
my small maintenance contract then.
at
That's all I'm
least at
asking.
least give me a maintenance contract for the
Yeah.
$1 million? Or throw me
One
100,000 at least. Come on, man, help me out.
Right. One thing I did once that I thought was creative and really funny was I did a scratch off and I bought like the things that like the material that you actually scratch off, that silver stuff. It was like a
Uh-huh.
sticker and I put it inside the card and it'd be like if you lost, scratch here, which most people lost. Or it was like if you don't win more than $10 or something. And if you scratched off the thing that I did, underneath it said you want a free appointment with me. So
I love it.
I
Those are
mean, as
great
long as
tips.
they might not, go with me, but they're not going to forget me. That's for sure. So I think
That's
being
awesome.
memorable with your drop offs and like intentional. And like, again, I've told people like, oh, I think you'd like this cannoli place I go to. Okay, then I'll go pick them up and drop them off and be like, here, try it. Or they told me they really like something. So like listening to people and hearing what they really like, I
Mm-hmm.
think goes a long way because sometimes salespeople don't, it sounds bad, like don't listen to understand. They're listening to respond. So I'm,
Mm.
observing the room. Like if I see on their wall, they have a calendar that has motorcycles on it. Oh, do you ride motorcycles? Oh, are you into cars? You know what I mean? So then you could
Mm-hmm.
ask questions. I think people underestimate those little clues about people that you can see just based on walking in.
So you sound like you could teach a class on sales. How did you learn because when you're talking, I'm thinking, man, I was not that good of a sales. I was a good like engineering teacher. Like I love to teach. That
Yeah,
was my sales style, was to educate, get on the plans, and then have a
sure.
good shot at closing the job. But I was not a good, like, you say no, I'd forget you. I don't even like, I was not a good follow up, or the stuff you're
Yeah.
talking about is very professional, very precise. How did you learn all that?
Sure. I used to be bad at following up. When I got into sales, I was in an industry where you made 200 calls a day. So
Oh,
this
wow.
felt easier. It was a much longer sales process, but like initially. but to make significantly less calls and have more, valuable time with people, it was easy. I would say based on my initial sales job, honestly taught me a lot. I worked for somebody who initially was in the used car business in like the early 2000s, 90s, when like there's a very specific way people describe used car salesmen, and it's just because they just get the deal. Like, I don't know what it is about that, especially back in the day. Now they're seen as negative, like the pushy, overbearing, ripping you off. But at the time, learning like the tactics of like not giving up and getting the deal done right then and there helped me. But that's why following up initially was kind of hard for me, because I was like, what do you mean you don't want to sign right here, right now, today? Like,
right.
But then I realized that opportunities come when usually there's like a pain point or something's happening with people. So transitioning to the not instant sale to a long-term sale was hard for me initially. But then I realized if you're not like front of mind to somebody, they're going to forget even if they have an issue. And I was losing out on quite a bit of business. And one of my coworkers is like the follow-up guru. Like, I couldn't do what he does. But taking part of what he does and applying it is helped me substantially. And honestly, if I learned if they're not, open to doing business with you now, they might know somebody else is, or when the time comes, they're like, you know what, she made an effort to reach out to me throughout this process, even though I wasn't, I was in a current contract with somebody else or was happy, they're more likely to reach out to you versus the sales, rep they heard from one or two times. So because they feel special. So that's kind of what I learned, because I was not a good follow-up person to begin with, just based on two different types of sales.
Wow, that's great. And I love it. And I love what you were talking about listening. And, I think there is a bad stigma with sales in a lot of areas, but I can tell you in my experience, and it sounds like yours too, is in our industry, it's really not that kind of sleazy and pushy. And, when I was going into sales as a sales engineer, or we call them account executives today, I was shocked at how, and even today when I meet folks, we're like relationship builders, not really salespeople. And you're the same way. It sounds like you're there to help. You're there to provide a service. You're not afraid to remind them, hey, I'm here if you need me. Hey, don't forget about me, and I'll bring you some cannolis and some scratch offs. That's totally Chicago. Like the scratch offs and cannolis is really totally Chicago. I love it. Anyway.
I said that and I was like, I just gave the most Chicago examples, and you can clearly tell that I'm part Italian, but I was handing out scratch off and cannolis.
No, I get it.
Customers, but
if you showed up around here with cannolis, they'd be like, "What is a cannoli?"
Yeah, right. I'd be like, "Perfect. I can come back to explain."
Hey, there you go.
That's exactly that.
I love it. Well, awesome. Anything else you want to talk about, Chloe, or what do you think? We cover some good stuff here.
Yeah, I think I'm good. Yeah, unless you have any more questions.
I think we've provided a little bit of insight into your role and role into sales and opportunities in HVAC. So thank you so much for coming on. We'll want to do this again sometime. We'll follow up on LinkedIn on the messaging part, and we'll do this again. So Chloe, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.